Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm so glad you could make it here today. On this first slide, you see a constellation of entities here in Edmonton. I just want to stress that we're going to be going around the world to look at some different examples of deliberation and democracy, but you really do have a special opportunity here in Edmonton to create some innovative things. This idea of a partnership between the university and the city is quite unusual at the degree of integration they have. And if you're interested in more about that, you can talk to anyone, but the Center for Public Involvement, I think, is a great place to get started. And thank you to everyone. It's great to be a part of International Week. Had some wonderful conversations. Gramsci has come up twice in the last 2 days, which is a lot more than it has in a while for me. I want to give a special shout out to those who are online, especially the person from the other country. They weren't sure what that was. So you can pretend you're from anywhere when you send in a question. I personally hope it's Slovenia because it's a cool place. But what you're missing is, I know you don't have a live video feed of me. I'm actually wearing a plaid suit with a green sash. And the audience is all in orange. I think it's something about Occupy Edmonton. I wish you could see that, but it's, you know, that's too bad. The other thing is, those of you online, I guarantee you, we're going to get 4 glimpses of democracy's future, but in 30 minutes or less. And as I promised online, if I don't make it under 30 minutes, I will renew for free 1 month of your World of Warcraft account. So we start with a quote. As I understand it, a quote that helped inspire the theme for International Week this year comes from Francis Moore from the previous session. The quote is, we need to explore democracy as a way of life, no longer something done to us or for us, but what we ourselves create. I love that sentiment, but if I can be a nerd, and trust me, I can, I want to make sure that that we is pretty broadly encompassing, because when I see a quote like this and I get in the spirit of it and I look at the things going on around me here in International Week, it's easy to think of we as active citizens, as this special group of people. We're going to do something, we're going to take our government back, we're going to create a social movement, and all those things are fantastic. As it happens, today's talk involves governments and citizens, those same citizens, but working in partnership with government. What I mean to say is that when you look at some of the most important transformations in our society, and certainly transformations in democracy, you often see enlightened public officials making key strategic decisions, taking risks in concert with the support of public. And so again, we are going to create a new kind of democracy, but I just want to make clear, I think that we is going to involve some pretty boring people and institutions that you mostly like to hate. So when I say I'm going to talk about deliberative democracy, I want to start just by saying let's not get carried away. It is sort of a kind of movement thing. I mean, it is a global thing, and it's exciting, and it's happening, and you can't stop it, and that's all cool, but it's actually kind of boring. It really is. It's a revolution in procedural fairness. All right? It's not actually about the economy, and I understand there's economic problems, but it actually does have tremendous fiscal power. It's not really about the environment. And I know the earth is burning and we're going to die, but it does actually create better public policy on the environment. And it's not actually overthrowing any dictators. This isn't exactly spring. This isn't exactly the Middle East. But it can happen there any time of year. Once you have an electoral process, you start to think, well, that was cool, but maybe I need something more. Maybe there's a better kind of democracy, and that's what it's really about. It's about changing what we mean when we say we want a democracy. Specifically saying, oh yeah, I think we need some deliberation. So we just came a few minutes ago from a debate on Occupy Wall Street and whether it should have a focused topic. Best reference to the movie The Blob I've ever heard came from that debate, which was wonderful. But the first speaker said, I'm going to define my terms. And I thought, oh my God, you are such a nerd. And I thought, I have to do that too. So deliberative democracy. I got a rep here, people. A deliberative democracy is a modern political system that meets the basic requirements of democratic elections, but also features public institutions, cultural norms, and citizen participation that all support a deliberative, reflective, informed, respectful process for solving collective problems. And let's be clear, respect doesn't mean you can't disagree, or you can't even get angry. It doesn't mean that. It just means that we maintain a broader theme of civility, mutual respect, and trying to work through problems together. Not always reaching consensus, but reflective, informed, deliberative democracy. That's what this movement is all about. Now, I go straight to the jury. I told you it would be boring. Look at this jury. I mean, they're not going to have a good day. I suspect it's a civil trial, a malpractice suit. It's probably frivolous. But nonetheless, they're going to render a verdict. And what I think is so incredible, for all the complaints and caricatures we have of the jury, it just does its thing. It just does its thing. In the United States, when you were accused of committing a crime, you know there's a jury down the road should you go there. You have lots of other options, but that's incredible. You go all around the world to so many countries and people think, that's interesting and incredibly dumb. But we say no. We actually believe that there is this institution where random, semi-random citizens come together and render judgments on things they knew nothing about before the trial. I mean, complex corporate crimes, the jury renders a verdict. That's incredible. And what I'm trying to say is when deliberative democracy, you'll know it has won when things like the jury are all over the place and boring and taken for granted. That's when we'll know we've won. The revolution will not be televised because it will have already happened and it's boring. But the jury is exceptional. I grant that. It is actually an exceptional body, and that's part of the reason it's overlooked. But today's talk is going to look at some new company the jury has. There's actually some new institutions. They're becoming real institutions, and it's exciting to see it happen. And seeing them, glimpsing them, gives us an idea of what this deliberative democracy might start to look like. And again, we're going to see real governments working hand in hand with citizens who are wanting to change their world. So speaking of that world, let's go ahead and jump in there. We're going to go first to the place farthest from where we are here in Alberta. We'll go down to Kerala in the southwestern corner of India. Kerala is actually, we're just going to go right to the airport, just land kind of safely there in the first slide. I wasn't sure where to go, but I just wanted a tarmac. It's been the site of tremendous political and socioeconomic reform in the past 50 years. If you don't know much about India, trust me, people who know a lot about India say, oh, Kerala. That's completely different. And it's like, well, fine, okay, but it's India. It's still India. But it really does have quite a distinctive history that is partly of its own making. Kerala has life expectancy, literacy, education, standard of living rates that are quite apart from most of the other parts of India. Actually exceeds many of the standards of what we would call developed countries. Has a large urban and dispersed rural population, and sometimes gets accused of exceptionalism, as I said. But as a friend of mine from India has observed, Kerala is just like the rest of India in that it kind of exists simultaneously in multiple centuries. And so it has tremendous complexity, tremendous diversity, and terrible histories of marginalization and oppression for several populations. But Kerala has done something incredible, and the reason it gets our first glimpse of the future of deliberative democracy is this. We're just going to do some glimpsing here so we have this quick little timeline, but you got to understand that in 1993, a couple amendments to the Constitution in India really changed things. And the stress was placed on the importance of local government and devolution, which created an opportunity to have more powerful local government, something that actually in India was quite a new concept of local government. When I went to do a workshop there, I answered all kinds of questions. We had all kinds of great high-level discussions, but I also wanted to talk about things like municipal waste. Who's responsible for that? And just conceptualizing different ways of doing local government is still kind of a lively debate in many parts of India. But Kerala figured it out for themselves. In 1996, a left-wing party in Kerala was elected and implemented a decentralization pledge. This was their theme. That's what they said we're going to do. And they delivered on that promise with the People's Plan campaign. Ultimately, we've mobilized through this process, I'm not included in that, we as the collective of people doing it, 2 million participants, 160 per Gram Sabha. And a Gram Sabha is essentially a village council. It's sort of the smallest unit. And there is a multi-layered process in the People's Plan where the Gram Sabha looks at the state budget, and ultimately about a third of the development budget, we're talking about huge sums of money, is going through these small Gram Sabhas and going on up from there. The participation in those meetings is very open, somewhat loosely structured. Unfortunately, it's not that well researched at the real micro level, which I think is a real disappointment. But the number of people participating in these has just multiplied dramatically over the first few years. So it's an incredible example of really getting a huge number of people connected to direct policy making in a country that had no tradition really of strong local government, at least in the modern era. But there are problems. There's no doubt there are problems. When we say there's a mass mobilization, 2 million sounds pretty good, but that's about 10%. The middle class and people with higher levels of education have tended to start dropping out of the process. There's disproportionate participation by people who happen to be affiliated with the local party at any one immediate area, so there tends to be kind of a skewed participation. And interestingly, there's been a great analysis of what was the money actually spent on through these. Women and lower castes have benefited tremendously in terms of the allocation being shifted towards concerns specifically to those groups, but their numbers as participants is still quite low and disproportionate. So thanks for the favor, but we're not quite there. Let's just say we started there, and let's now move on. Let's kind of go across the ocean and look at something that bears some resemblances to the People's Plan, but maybe more familiar to many of you, and that's participatory budgeting in Brazil.